do that again. How y'all doing today? Hey man, y'all look beautiful, man. Y'all clap it up for yourselves first. We don't get to have a lot of spaces in Oakland where black folks, when we used to be a black city, it's not a black city no more. So when it's us together in the room with just us, let's love it. So again, black people, how are you doing tonight? Alright, so my name is Charles Cole. I lived in a bunch of places, but I grew up here in Oakland. Went to a lot of different schools here. My family was, impacted by the crack epidemic and lived in shelters. Went to 11 elementary schools between Chicago, Kentucky, and here. So when this question comes up, it was a big question, but I condensed it a little bit of how do we advance our people beyond social norms to be better. I think a few things, man. It's hard to be better if you don't know who you are and where you come from. If you don't know what's in you and what's piping through you and that you come from greatness, and if you living in those shelters, I started to believe that I was those shelters. I started to believe that I was there because I was supposed to be. And I think that until I realized and learned more about where I came from, more about my history, more that my history is more than dope fiends and drug addicts and jailbirds and murderers or whatever the case is, right? Once I learned that I came from really powerful places, I think that that's just really important. I think the other thing is social norms, social media, the zeitgeist, like none of that stuff is not real. It's not, it doesn't exist. It only kind of exists on our phones and our screens, and you can turn those off. I think that, we got to get back to a place where we are actually teaching our young people, our community, actual skills, and talking to them and having real conversations. Because as long as we allowing social media and screens to tell us what's right and what's wrong, you're going to keep having confused people. And so I think that those are just some really interesting ways. And I think finally, just to not take up too much time and space, I think education is the crutch of all of this stuff, right? And I think that we have to really start demanding the type of education and learning for our communities. And there's a difference between schooling and education. School is the apparatus and the building which we go to, which has failed us over and over and over again. Education is the actual things of value that we learn. We, as black people, are the only race that actively hand our kids over to a different race and expect them to teach us. Now, I'm not saying that we need to revolt and rebel against all these schools, but maybe we do. But I look at other cultures. So when you go into Chinatown, try to open up a store in Chinatown as a black person and see what happens, right? So, I'm gonna end this by saying, I've worked in education for a long time, and I'll just look at Chinatown as an example. All their kids go to school together, and they go to the Oakland Unified School District, but those kids and those families choose that those kids are either gonna go to Chinese school after school or on the weekends, right? Like there's an apparatus that's teaching them about their culture and who they are and making sure that they're self-sufficient, and they know how to keep their dollar in their community. We are the only people that's running and rushing to integrate with folks that don't like us and don't fool with them. So I'm gonna shut up there and let other people on the panel have the time to go.
Thank you, Ms. B, for inviting me to this platform. I'm very honored and I'm grateful to be here. I am currently a student that's seeking a master's in community mental health, with a minor in mental health psychotherapy. Yeah. And I just wanted to...
Those waters are yours. Two apiece.
And I have just really stepped into my worth, my self-worth, I feel is being a place for my people. And knowing how to step forward and be a place for my people, for my career to where I am. A way that I feel that we should come together to be as one. I think that for black people, I think that we need to believe in ourselves a little bit more. I think that we should believe, I think that we should come together and form or organize movements for what we believe in and what we said. I've done a lot of research. Just recently, I did a literature review about African American education, and I did begin to really see myself living the life that I lived. I remember life before the crack era. I remember life
Excuse me, before you go, can you speak into the mic? Because I can't even hear you. And I feel like you're about to tell some important information. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I had a tumor in my throat and I had surgery, so sometimes it's kind of hard for me to take control of my voice. But I was saying that I remember life before the crack era, and I remember what my grandparents and my parents, what they stood for, the values and principles and morals, and how family valued family, how we valued one another, how we helped one another. You can leave your kid with me, and while you go to work, and I'll help you. I mean, we were helping one to another more so. During my endeavor and learning about more of the systems and how they work, I began to see myself in that picture, in that system, and how it worked against me. As an African American girl, my mom was a single parent, and my father was in and out, one of those situations. And I really had taken to, in my literature review, about education, because I felt in this picture that I have been cheated so much. I have been cheated through education. Again, felt cheated to the system about education because in my elementary school years, I struggled a lot. And I was pushed to the wall, and there was nothing in place. There wasn't systems in place enough to, there was no IEP. There was no support systems for single parents, not just single parents, but there was no system there. And so within my literature review, I relived really truthfully what my ancestors have been fighting for all this long time. That's how I got into the research, and I started to feel like I wanted to speak up about the situation. So I couldn't speak loud enough, so I wrote about it. And I'm not planning to do a dissertation about it, but I can definitely talk about African American education and a lot of injustice that came along with it. But again, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here about. And that's what I'm here for, to be a voice and to, call it the way I see it, because that's how I live it. And to now prevent the kids from going through what's happening here, right here in Oakland. You see what's happening right here in Oakland, except for now, it's not just about the black race. It's about those that don't have enough money to call shots the way they want to call.
We couldn't hear that part. I'm so sorry.
I'm going to be done here. I'm going to pass the mic, but I'm sorry if you didn't hear. I'm just saying that the things that are happening in education today, we've been fighting for the same thing for I don't know a numerous amount of years, and they keep coming up with the same rhetoric in a different way. So this is where I am right now. There's so many different categories that I can speak from about the injustice of our people. I just sometimes get splattered all over the place, and I get into this and I get into that, and I just want to. That's all right. I'll keep it on.
We'll keep it moving. We'll keep you going. But you're going to continue to be a part of this.
I write about it. I write about it, and hopefully I can get something printed up. I have a few things, and I was such a rush tonight. I didn't bring it with me, but I'm going to.
Divine time, divine order. You here. You got what you're supposed to have. Give her a hand, y'all.
Loaded question. When I think about the question of social norms, I think about the work of Amos Wilson. And Amos Wilson had a concept called pathological normalism, where he looked at the thoughts, the value systems, the motivations, the actions in black people, right? What we participate in that is inimical to our own people. It helps to destroy and tear down our own people, and thereby supports white racism and supports white supremacy as a global system. And so what I zero in on is the issue of awareness. You know, when we get a family in the room and there's a cancer in the family, we can't move further if we can't admit to what's in the room. If the father's an abuser, we can't go further unless we call it out, call it what it is. That make sense? So awareness is, I think, the first thing. Being aware of what we do, what we say, how we think, how we are infected, because you don't go through this type of system without some level of infection. Calling it what it is and then trying to address it as honestly as we can address it. I tend to look at thought, speech, and action in terms of whether or not it is destroying the mindset of white supremacy or supporting the mindset of white supremacy. It doesn't matter who the mindset is in. And we have some ways of being that are completely predatory to each other. Predatory to each other. So, you know, when I think about, so the first phase is awareness, and accepting it once we see it, right? Having that motivation to change. But then I think people need help to change. Because you just can't step, I've been a black psychologist for a while, and you can't step to black people any kind of way. That ain't happening, period. You can't step to brothers any old kind of way, right? But I think if we understand, even as healers, right, or people who are trying to be healers, I consider myself a student of black psychology. Yeah, I'm a student, I'm still trying to get it. Still trying to understand, and our people is a lot to understand. Still trying to understand it, still trying to deliver it in a way that makes sense for our people. And one of the things we do is we understand stepping into a relationship that, there may be something for that person to gain, but there's probably something for us to gain, too. And as a matter of fact, our ancestors might be in the whole conversation, unbeknownst to us. Does that make sense? It's about looking at the social norms that don't build us up, right? Recognizing where we come from, right? I grew up in South Central. That's how I grew up, chasing bullets. I don't try to deny that fact. And when I step to you, that's who I am, right? So hopefully the relationship itself allows us to be, to move towards some honesty, right? And feel good about the change that we're about to make. Because I tell you, I hope you got another question there, because once we do that, it's off the chain. I mean, we really, brother said education, sister said education, we really don't know who we are and what we have potential to create. We have an inkling of it.
How you doing? Such a blessing to be here. My name is Joel Sensignan. I am a filmmaker, an educator, and being in a position where I am at the table and people are willing to sit down and hear me speak is really something that I never take for granted. Being that I have been a self-conscious broken black man for the better part of my life. When I hear this type of question, the way that I usually address it is just, I just share my own personal experience, right? Because I was born in France, Paris. I have no Haitian descent. my
Say
wife.
that again?
Can you hear
Did
me?
you hear it? I think this one's better. So these mics are kind of tricky.
Can you hear me
Test
better?
it.
All right. All right.
We gonna get it.
Right. So when I speak from my own experience, my own personal experience. This is all I have to offer. This black man. I am Asian, born and raised in France, Paris. Grew up there until I was 19 years old, until I moved into the United States. Married my African wife. And why am I saying this is because I feel like, to answer that question, the black experience is so diverse, so diverse. It's just a narrative that has been reading for us that's been the same all across, right? Being born in France, Paris, my 7th grade teacher spat on my face and kept her job, so I had to
Spit in your face.
spit in my face,
And
kept her job,
And kept it.
so I had to watch this woman teach me math for the entire year, keeping her job. That's oppression. Then I moved to the United States, and I have to worry about not being shot by the people that are supposed to, that are paid to protect us. That's oppression. And I go to Togo, the motherland of my wife, which is where she's from, and I see billboards of those white people with ads about, lighting up our skin, and they literally put labels calling them, oh, these are the goddess that you need to look like, in what we call our motherland. That's oppression, right? So from New York to Oakland, it's always the same story. And to me personally, I've decided that this is not going to be my story. I am an older person now, so I think that for me, it's hard now for it to be second nature, for me to, constantly love myself. It's a constant battle to really understand that I am greatness, right? And the way that I can really experience it is through the eyes of my children, right? My son is in the back over there selling his Jordan for $50. Feeling confident that, yes.
He's an artist.
Yes, he is an artist, and he lives it every day, right? And looking through his eyes is the narrative that I know is changing, right? It might be for me a constant battle beforehand, and for my baby daughter, something is different. And, to piggyback on what his brothers were saying, right, about the narrative that is waiting for us, right? I decided that I'm not going to be angry about it. I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to start breaking stuff. I'm just going to stop investing in it.
That's right.
This is not.
Say that again, please.
Excuse me?
You gonna stop what?
I'm going to stop investing in it, right? In this product that are not meant for us, right? And this is the narrative in my house, right? One of the greatest quotes of all time. I'm not going to say who it is because I have my reservation about this person. They say, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Right? And this is, and you are going to find that it's much less exhausting when you do that. When you go home, you apply, and you lead by example, rather than going out there and constantly telling people a story that they don't necessarily want to hear. Right? It's pretty simple, When you walk into my house, this is the narrative, right? If this is an area that you want to be around, this is something that you need to accept, right? I absolutely don't care what you look like, white, black. This is a narrative that you need to understand, right? Because I have lived it. There is white supremacy everywhere in the world, right? So now, it doesn't matter where you go. It's present. Even there's no place that you can go home without knowing that this thing is the place. Until you change that in your home, in your body, in your soul, until you decide that this is not going to be your narrative, and therefore you're not going to invest in it, this is not going to change your problem. Right? So what do we need to do? I don't know. I just know what has been working for me. Right? And this has been the narrative. And seeing it through my children, I know that, this is working.
Now, I said that to say, put black in front of that, and then search it, and see what comes up. I'll give you an example. Because what this is how we define ourselves. If we're going to let Google define us, then we get a narrow definition. But understand how Google defines you. And I just want to read that little piece. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I just looked it up. So, and it says, when you pull up them, when you put black social norms, you get stuff like black and white female perceptions of ideal body size. What social norms and social identity collide in black, when race talk, the limit for racial, get defined as a color, as opposed to as a person, as a group. And it's all negative. In terms of the body types in the community now, because I'm in health, all right? I've been practicing about 30 years. My background is in general medicine, family practice. That's just to say that I've been around and did a few things. And what I found in taking care of my people in primary care and family practice, they're afraid of taking care of themselves. They're afraid of being healthy. We define ourselves because, again, if the definition is that from a social norm aspect, but really it's a color aspect, then black people don't feel worthy. We don't feel worthy to take care of ourselves. We don't feel worthy to love. And if you don't love yourself, then you love a substance. You love a sex, depending on what you're doing.
Keep it real.
You know?
We keep it real and little.
And so now we're in a collide because what we've been placed in is the cauldron. And what I say is that this has been going on for the last 300 years. This is what I can speak to it more about. And if you're really interested, go read George the Curious Post-Traumatic Slavery Disorder. Because it talks about the internal trauma that we've experienced that has us thinking like we're thinking.
Did you say post-traumatic slave syndrome? What you said?
Huh?
Disorder. I just couldn't hear you. Would you say post-traumatic slave syndrome?
I say it's a book, well.
Yeah, it's a book.
Yeah.
I read it.
And the discussion around post-traumatic slavery disorder is how we define since we've been here, how we got here, what was it, physical, mental, and sexual traumas that, and I have to include that because that's a part of us. We always negate that. That's who we are. And as our young people start to try to redefine themselves, what are they doing? You can't have it all. I know that for a fact, because I take care of folks. So I'm saying, as I move it back to the center, that we have to stop being defined by social norms that do not relate to us, do not culturally love us, do, if anything, implode upon us. Because you have to have a discussion about someone that believes you can walk down the street, be shot, and nothing happened to you. That's a heavy discussion, right? A young black man sitting in his house, remember these are all black men getting shot. Now there are black women getting shot. So now there's not going to be no distinction. So I think in understanding these social norms, understanding the politics that put us here, understanding, now we really understand that there's racism. If you did, you know, white supremacy, whatever you want to call it. It's something that says that I think I'm better than you. And by the same token, Trump says we built this country. He's a smart guy, believe it.